You join us for round 3 of the 2008 season, coming to you at the Suzuka circuit, the Japanese Grand Prix. And the 5 lights go out, and from pole position, Takuma Sato looks as if he's gotten away rather well. And we're having a focus on Fernando Alonso in one of the Japanese teams, Super Aguri. He's got a McLaren on the inside, that'll be Kimi Raikkonen. Now to go through the first couple of corners, it looks clean so far. There's a BMW Sauber going through. BMW Sauber's running Nico Hülkenberg and Juan Pablo Montoya. I think we are looking at Nico Hülkenberg. And just further up, I think Lewis Hamilton's had a bit of a bad start. He's down a couple of positions. Was 9th on the grid, now he's down to 11th. Behind Fernando, next Christian Albers and Adrian Sutil. The 2 Force Indias have gotten away well. Look at that. 2 Toyotas. We're having a look at Takuma Sato going into the second Degner. That's not a traditional overtaking spot. As we go into the hairpin, it's the Honda of Takuma Sato, leading Jenson Button in the Toyota. In the Toyota, there's a bit of contact and brake lockups. That's Nico Hülkenberg we're looking at. Got a bit of a nudge from behind by one of the Williamses. Could well be Jules Bianchi. But anyway, Sutil has taken Christian Albers for 9th place into the spoon curve. You can see on the graphic below, green means good, red means down. And exiting the spoon curve, the 2 Ferraris are getting quite close to each other, as are the 2 Toyotas into 130 yard. Jenson Button versus Mark Webber. That's not been sticking. There's a Super Aguri making a move on the other Honda of Matthias Lauda, who qualified tremendously, up in 3rd place, but he's down to 5th at the moment, having just been passed by Felipe Massa for 4th in the Super Aguri. But it's the end of lap 1, and it is Takuma Sato on board with the 3-time champion, going through the first couple of corners and entering one of the best sequences of corners. The S's, left, then right, then another left, and then one more right before the big long left of the Dunlop curve. Oh, and off goes Juan Pablo Montoya in the BMW Sauber at the S's, but rejoining, having lost just the 1 position. That was to Lewis Hamilton, so Hamilton had lost another place. And rounding the Dunlop, there's yellow flags out, so somebody has had an off. That might be a little bit further back in the field, because it's certainly not at the front. It's Daniel Ricciardo who's crashed out of the race. And there he is. That is exiting the 3rd corner of the S's. We're going to see a replay of this. He gets... Oh my goodness me! That was the other Toro Rosso he hit. So Paul Di Resta had run wide and rejoined right into the path of Daniel Ricciardo. That's not team tactics at all. Sato, the 2 Toyotas. That's still your top 3, but it is Felipe Massa now in 4th position. So rounding the spoon curve and past the Olympus signs, and Takuma Sato building up a lead now. It's some 1.5 seconds now over Jenson Button, but that was going through the first sector point. Still 1.5 seconds going through the second sector point. So, and we've got Fernando Alonso, who's just overtaken Kimi Raikkonen for 6th place, but Kimi Raikkonen having another look at the Spaniard. That was going into... Oh, off goes the Spaniard. Alonso off track, lost a position to Raikkonen and to Vettel. So a crucial error for the Spaniard, who led the last race, the Oceanian Grand Prix. Well, let's just hold that thought, because that is the Force India coming up the inside. It's Christian Albers into the first corner. That is a position gain for Albers. So Alonso, having just taken Raikkonen for 6th place, now down to 10th. That looked like Felipe Massa struggling at the S's. Because he's got a right queue of cars behind him. They consist of Matthias Lauda, Kimi Raikkonen, Sebastian Vettel, Adrian Sutil, and that's about it. Christian Albers a little bit further back, having just got past Fernando Alonso. Okay, so that thought on Fernando Alonso earlier. Oh, off the track, somebody went off. It's Alonso again! Fernando Alonso having a scruffy lap. He's not had a good start to the season at all, has Fernando. He's, well, retired from the very first lap at Melbourne. Then he led the Oceanian Grand Prix at Adelaide before his engine failed. Very unfortunately for the Spaniard. Now, the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka has gone a bit messily for him. Kimi Raikkonen versus Matthias Lauda, but look at Sebastian Vettel remaining in the slipstream. That's what on earth is going to happen into the 130R, side by side between Lauda and Raikkonen. And I don't know what came out of that. Heidfeld has just taken Hamilton for 10th. Saw some more side by side. That was what it was. Nick Heidfeld moving up to 10th place at the expense of Lewis Hamilton, who seems to be struggling at this early stage of the race. And while we're on board with the Williams, worth mentioning that at the time of recording this, it's the team principal's birthday, so happy birthday to you, Andy. As his main driver Nick Heidfeld goes through the first couple of corners, we switch to Mark Webber, now a fairly stable third place. He's got Jenson Button building a gap over himself in front of him, but Mark Webber's got quite a large gap ahead of Felipe Massa. And into the first Degner, Raikkonen versus Lauda. That is not an overtaking spot, and rightly so. Into the pits comes Juan Pablo Montoya, so he's obviously had an incident or a mechanical drama somewhere because he's had to pit very, very early, and he was down in 19th anyway. So BMW Sauber's race, well, at least for Montoya, not going well, but Montoya did score some points last time out at Adelaide. That was in 7th place in a race of very high attrition, which saw just 8 drivers running at the end. And they consisted of race winner Adrian Sutil, who actually shares the World Championship lead with that driver there, Jenson Button, because they've got a win and a retirement each. Third in the championship is Takuma Sato, and one of the very few drivers who have scored points in the first 2 races, the other one being his own teammate, Matthias Lauda. And Lauda actually crashed out before half distance, was still awarded the point for 10th. And look at this action here, Nico Hülkenberg and Jules Bianchi right behind him. There's a Renault that was getting in the mix as well, but let's have a look at Jules Bianchi having a look at Nico Hülkenberg into the first corner, and similarly, Kamui Kobayashi versus the Renault of, I think it's Robert Kubica, and Hülkenberg riding the wall of death round the first corner, nearly off the track completely. But Bianchi takes that position, and Kobayashi took that position off of the Renault. So the 8 remaining finishers at the Oceanian Grand Prix at Adelaide, they were race winner Sutil, second place Robert Kubica, who had a tremendous drive from way down the order to finish second in the Renault. Third was Felipe Massa, who did lead the race for a little bit, but struggled when the track got at its wettest towards the end of the race. Fourth was Kamui Kobayashi. Fifth was Daniel Ricciardo, who finished 5th in the Oceanian Grand Prix, so Ricciardo gets points in front of his home crowd, as Mark Webber did in the Australian Grand Prix at Melbourne. That's Paul Di Resta we're looking at, who was involved in a first lap crash last time out with Timo Glock. It was a very optimistic move going into Brewery Bend that cost both drivers races on the very first lap. Another driver who retired on the first lap last time out at Oceanian Adelaide was Sebastian Vettel. It was a 3-way contact between himself, Lewis Hamilton, and I think it was a Williams that hit him. But Vettel was in the middle of that one. So, very unfortunate retirement for the German. Remaining finishers, 5th Ricciardo, 6th was... Who on earth finished 6th in that race? It was... off the track goes Hamilton in the Red Bull. Spinning wildly, but rejoining quite nicely in front of the Ferrari. Hamilton finished 8th in the last race. It would have been a 9th, but Jules Bianchi crashed out very late on. And look at the Ferrari having a look at Hamilton into the first Degner, and Hamilton giving him space, and the Ferrari just about backing out of that one. It's Sergio Perez that is battling with Lewis Hamilton. There is Jules Bianchi, who was in 5th and looking quite good for 4th place last time out, but crashed out at Brewery Bend, pushing hard to try and catch Kamui Kobayashi. Still struggling to remember who finished 6th in that last race. It will come to me eventually, but 7th was Juan Pablo Montoya. Oh, Takuma Sato finished 6th, that was it. Speaking of which, Sato still leads. The gap is coming down between himself and Jenson Button. It's less than a second, as the Ferrari of Perez has another look at Hamilton into the 130R, but just a sighter, nothing too serious. Hamilton choosing the middle for the Casio triangle, which was probably the best way to go about, because it means that he's maintained a position ahead of Sergio Perez. Through the S's, that's Mark Webber we're looking at there, and then to the left of 4, then the right of 5. In fact, it's the right of 6, now into the Dunlop curve, which, for me personally, has always been a bogey corner. no matter what video game I'm playing on, it's always a tricky corner for me. But Mark Webber some 2 seconds behind Jenson Button, who is catching up to Takuma Sato. It looks as if the Toyota's looking strong in this early stage of the race, but Takuma Sato still the one who leads the race. In fact, the top 5 places all covered by Japanese teams, because it's the Honda 1st and 5th, the Toyota 2nd and 3rd, and the Super Aguri of Felipe Massa in 4th place. 6th in the race so far, it is Kimi Raikkonen in the McLaren, who started on pole position in the Oceanian Grand Prix, taking advantage when the track was at its driest to put in a good lap in at that point, because times in qualifying were slower than in practice. That's why Raikkonen was able to get on pole position, but he crashed out after... Oh, let's have a look at Kobayashi. No, this is Kimi Raikkonen actually, having a look at Matthias Lauda into the Casio triangle. A speculative one, but does look as if Raikkonen is quicker at the moment. Now we switch back to Mark Webber going through the first couple of corners, now into the S's. You can see in the distance it is still Takuma Sato and Jenson Button, 1st and 2nd. So the situation in the Constructors' Championship is that Toyota do lead. Who do they lead it from? Because it must be Force India. Yeah, Force India. So Toyota hold a 10-point lead over Force India in the championship. Toyota sit on 43, Force India sit on 33. But at the moment, as it stays like this, and they are only on lap 8, so there's a long way still to go, and Toyota will extend their lead quite comprehensively. But as mentioned, there's still 45 or so laps to go, and at the moment, Jenson Button looking a little bit closer to Takuma Sato as they approach the 130R corner using the 2002 or 2001 layout of Suzuka, and it's a pretty good layout. This is Nico Hulkenberg in 14th place, chasing Jules Bianchi. Just in front of Bianchi is still Sergio Perez, who I think is probably still trying to challenge Lewis Hamilton. But they're not exactly spacing out in the midfield. Sergio Perez not dropping back a little bit from Hamilton actually. This is lap 9 now, it's already nearly in double digits. This is going to be a fairly quick race. Suzuka is usually one of the quicker circuits that we visit, full of quick corners such as this particular sequence. Going through Dunlop, goes to Takuma Sato, there's the runoff on the right hand side, very skinny runoff, and then the approach to one of the most difficult corners in the entire championship, the 2 Degners, because if you hit the curve wrongly you will be spat off into the gravel trap on the outside, and it's very, very difficult to recover from there. This is the hairpin curve, and it's Mark Webber we are on board with as he goes out of the hairpin into the acceleration zone of a corner which I believe is called 300R, refers to the radius of the corner. And now into the spoon curve, one of the best named corners because it's shaped like a spoon. Quite a deep spoon if you look at it from a certain angle. And now onto the back straight where the support pits are, or the pits are for the West Circuit. A circuit that's very rarely driven on in certain Gran Turismo games. And it's the Casio triangle come the leaders, Takuma Sato and Jenson Button looking very close to him at that point. So Takuma Sato is going to be coming under a bit of pressure very soon. And now he enters double digits. Let's have a look at Fernando Alonso recovering. He's looking at Rubens Barrichello for 17th position going into the 130R, and that's ahead of him before they reach the corner, so a safe overtake from Fernando Alonso on one of the more experienced drivers, Rubens Barrichello. Former Renault driver in this particular series. Could well have been 2004. Off the track goes Felipe Massa in 4th place. That's a spin! And Massa, he tried desperately to hang on to that one, but the pendulum effect got him in the end. So Felipe Massa from 4th place, he's going to plummet down the order. That's unfortunate. So that'll move Matthias Lauda up into 4th place, Kimi Raikkonen out to 5th, Vettel 6th, Suttle 7th, Albers 8th, Heidfeld 9th, and Lewis Hamilton's into the points. He's in 10th place now as Massa rejoined. So at least he's still in the race, but that is a good shot of some decent points gone. Unless we get a ridiculously high attrition rate like we did at Adelaide. But anyway, coming into 130R, Takuma Sato, Jenson Button still doing what he can to try and close in on the 3-time champion. The moment we switch to Sergio Perez, looked as if he'd missed the apex slightly on the first spoon apex, but he's still there in 11th place, but he is being caught up by Jules Bianchi. And through the haze comes the Mexican Sergio Perez, through the left. And then in a moment he'll be braking hard for the Casio chicane. And Ferrari sit last in the Constructors' Championship at the moment, so it's not been a good start at all for the Italian team. Their best result so far has been in 9th place. That was at Melbourne, and that did come from Sergio Perez. And then a disastrous race last time out at Adelaide, with Glock being shunted out on the first lap by Paul Di Resta. And then on lap 4, Sergio Perez's engine failed. Through the hairpin. That's the Toyota of Jenson Button. He's dropped back a bit from Takuma Sato now. In fact, Sato's disappeared a little bit. Showing as either 1 or 1.8 seconds on the timing screen. But we'll double check that once they cross the second sector point. Through goes Sato that we're on board with. It's 1.2 seconds, so Jenson's lost a little bit of time rather than quite a bit of time. Through the 130R goes Sato. Underneath the Bridgestone bridge. I wonder why they've sponsored it Bridgestone. It's a Japanese tyre company, and they've got two teams running their tyres in this race. That is a Red Bull that is having a look at. It's having a look at Matthias Lauda for 5th. Kimi Raikkonen has got past Lauda somewhere in the past few laps, as Alonso has a look at Kobayashi. That's Timo Glock, who's quite a way down the order, 21st place, so I don't know what's happened to him, but something obviously has, because he's way down the order. I don't recall him having to make a pit stop, so I wonder if Timo Glock's made a mistake on spin somewhere. Well, we did see Juan Pablo Montoya make a pit stop quite early, so was there contact between Glock and Montoya? I doubt it. I didn't exactly see the pit indicator come on for Sato. Well, we're looking at him right now, but I didn't see the pit indicator come up for Glock. So there'll be some explaining to do for the Ferrari team once again. Perez is 2.2 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. 2.2 seconds off the point, and Ferrari do need them. So we go on board with Jenson Button on his right-hand mirror as he sees Fuji TV being advertised. Now then, Sebastian Vettel versus Matthias Lauda into the spoon curve. He used to get past him pretty quickly because Kimi Raikkonen is disappearing a little bit in the distance, and Vettel's in good shape, but we switch to Jenson Button. Just keep an eye out on the timing graphic at the bottom and see if Vettel does indeed get past Matthias Lauda into the 130R. And some time has passed, and I don't think he's managed it. The new fastest lap for Jenson Button. A 1 minute 30.2 as he resumes some sort of chase after Takuma Sato. But he's now 1.5 seconds behind the reigning world champion. Oh, big lock-up for Fernando Alonso as he brakes hard for the Casio triangle and as he chases Robert Kubica. So Alonso's overtaken Kamui Kobayashi in the past few laps. So Alonso making a decent recovery drive after what was two fairly sizable errors, one much more sizable than the other. He's made another one there, missing the apex of the second corner. As we switch to Sebastian Vettel, still challenging Lauda into Degner. There's contact! Big contact! And Vettel's spinning wildly, and Lauda, that has cost Lauda much. Well, it's cost them both quite dearly, but that was it's not usually a place to overtake, and that's why. Big contact between the two. So Vettel, once all the cars have gone through, should be able to rejoin. But Lauda hasn't. He's out. So Vettel's optimism has cost one of the Hondas. And it's cost Vettel quite a lot of positions. He's down to 17th place. Now what's that done for the running order? That has now moved Christian Albers. It's moved Suttle up to 5th and Christian Albers up to 6th, so that'll be some good points for Force India. Nick Heidfeld's now up to 7th and Lewis Hamilton up to 8th, so one Red Bull's demise is the other one's moderate gain. That's now put Sergio Perez into the points, so Ferrari now in the points. Well done. And Jules Bianchi's up to 10th place, so we have got 2 Williams now in the points. And wouldn't that be a good birthday present for their team principal? And where do Williams sit in the Constructors' Championship, actually? So Williams, at the moment, sit 10th on 6 points, behind BMW Sauber, although equal on points. But BMW Sauber are ahead because Montoya has got a 7th place, and that's compared to It's compared to a 9th and an 8th for the 2 Williamses. An 8th for Heidfeld at Melbourne and a 9th for Bianchi at Adelaide. An overhead shot. This is of Jenson Button as he sits 1.2 seconds behind Takuma Sato. Basically at 1/3. No, we're not at 1/3 distance, are we? Let's have a look. Yeah, we've gone past 1/4 distance. Lap 14. Out of 53. I think Jensen's just gone through the 130R because we've now switched to Mark Webber, who is going through the Casio Triangle now. So, Fernando Alonso versus Robert Kubica. This is for 12th place now. So, that collision between Vettel and Button's pitting on this lap. So, Button making a slightly early pit stop. If it's an early stop for a 2-stop strategy. If it's a 3-stop, then it's about a lap on... Oh, and off goes Sato! Sato going off the track. So he's noticed that Jenson Button's in the pits and he's going to try and push very hard to try and maintain his lead once he makes his pit stop. And some more pit stops happening. I think that was Christian Albers and Nico Hulkenberg making pit stops. And through the first couple of corners. That is Jules Bianchi, now up to 8th place. But pit stops are happening. One of which was Jenson Button. Another one would have been from the Force India of Christian Albers. So through Dunlop Curve we are still looking at the Williams of Jules Bianchi as he tries to chase down that driver there, Sergio Perez, and Jenson Button rejoining behind the Frenchman in the Williams. So Takuma Sato, is this his in-lap or is he going for another few laps? Well, that mistake at the S's certainly won't have helped him, and that certainly won't help Fernando Alonso, missing the apex of turn 3 by... Well, I think he was in South Korea rather than Suzuka. Well, we were at Fuji last season. Maybe he still thinks we're in Mount Fuji. And he's made a pit stop as well because he's in 18th place now behind Juan Pablo Montoya in the BMW Sauber. I think the 2 BMW Saubers were about to go into combat. That is Kamui Kobayashi we are looking at, being pressured by a Renault. It must be Kubica. It's a 130R. Kubica, well, they're side by side. They're brave that rounds the 130R corner as we switch to Mark Webber, who tries to pursue race leader Takuma Sato. Lewis Hamilton into the pits from 6th place, that was, so he'll drop down the order a little bit. It should regain his points running position once everyone else makes their pit stops. Felipe Massa coming into the pits as well. And remember, he rejoined quite a way down the order after his lurid spin, desperately tried to hold it on. Tank slap to the left, tank slap to the right before the engine overtook the front of the car. And who are we looking at here? Is this Kimi Raikkonen? Yes, it is. Kimi Raikkonen, who currently runs in 3rd place, but some 12 seconds behind Mark Webber now. So Kimi Raikkonen looking set to be at best 5th, maybe 4th, depending on how his race goes. Now, are there going to be any more pit stops to come? Well, going through the Casio Triangle as Takuma Sato was making a pit stop. He was quite slow on the exit, but they do take unusual lines. As a Toro Rosso having a look into the Degner. Did they make it through safely? Yes, they did. As we watch the BMW Sauber of Nico Hulkenberg in behind his own teammate Juan Pablo Montoya, but Hulkenberg has made a pit stop. I don't believe Montoya has. Into the first corner comes your new third place driver, Adrian Sutil. It is Mark Webber leading the race now, but pit stops are going on. But let's keep an eye on where Takuma Sato rejoins. I think he's rejoined safely ahead of Jenson Button, as he's exited the pits and he's still ahead of Sergio Perez. So those in-laps worked out quite well for Sato, and Button being stuck behind Bianchi probably hasn't helped him out too much. Mark Webber, he's probably the next one to try and make a pit stop. It's Sergio Perez versus Sato into the Begner curves. And Honda will be having a few flashbacks because Lauda was taken out there earlier in the race by Sebastian Vettel. Montoya's into the pits again. So that's his second stop of the race. This time it's scheduled. The other one must have been a reliability gremlin. And the Degners. That's Christian Albers we are looking at. Where is he in the race? He's somewhere. He's not in the top lot, so he'll probably regain some positions. Mark Webber's into the pits. Mark Webber into the pits as Sato's being challenged by Sergio Perez into the 130R. Perez side by side. That is going to be a risky one. He's still on the outside into the Casio. Perez very brave on the brakes and he's got him. Sergio Perez taking that position off Takuma Sato. Now where is Mark Webber in relation to Takuma Sato? Because Webber stayed out a bit longer. It's Heidfeld who briefly leads at the moment. But of course, pit stops are going on. Look at that, Webber is behind Sato. So Webber rejoins ahead of Jenson Button. So that early pit stops cost Button a track position compared to his teammate. So that's worked out very nicely for the Australian. Now then, it's Heidfeld from Perez and Sato. Top two have yet to pit and Bianchi's also yet to pit as well. But the longer strategy doesn't seem to be going too badly. Off the track goes Paul Di Resta at the Casio Triangle. Is he making a pit stop or was that just a clumsy mistake? I think it was just a clumsy mistake. Like Fernando Alonso earlier on, so you're not alone, Paul. Glock comes into the pits for the Ferrari. He's quite a way down the order, so points do seem a bit unlikely for the German. He's had a bit of a terrible start to the season, and through no fault of his own. He had a mechanical problem in Australia, somewhere in the transmission, I believe, and then had that unfortunate first lap at Adelaide. Round in the Dunlop, let's have a look. It's a BMW Sauber having a look at a Renault. Hulkenberg versus probably Kubica, but it could be Barrichello. I think it is Kubica. There's Alonso. Toro Rosso, then Hamilton. It might be a recovering Vettel, actually. Heidfeld's into the pits, as is the Ferrari. So, Takuma Sato retakes the lead as Heidfeld and Perez make their pit stops, and Kubica with a lot of understeer going through the spoon curve. I think that is the spoon curve. We'll have a closer look. Yeah, there's grid hatchings, but it's not the start-finish straight. So he's about to approach the 130R now. And a few other drivers making pit stops. They include Kobayashi. And there's your new second place driver, Jules Bianchi, but he's probably due into the pits on either this lap or the next lap. Drivers tend to follow each other on each lap. And look at the two Toyotas quite close to each other once again. And somewhere along the lines, Button's got ahead of Webber, so he's now back up to a net second place. Jenson Button possibly on a lighter fuel load compared to Webber, as Webber did pit about 3 laps after the Brit. Jenson Button using that to his advantage and retaking what should be a net second place once Jules Bianchi makes a pit stop. So what's this done for the race order now? Well, it will be, well, let's wait until Bianchi makes his pit stop as we have a look at Christian Albers. Now in 8th place, and whereabouts is he on the circuit? Is that exiting the hairpin? Or is that exiting the final corner? I think that was exiting the hairpin because I think he's staying right, and it should turn left. It's the first spoon curve, and then turn left again for the second apex of the spoon curve. Look at that delay. That was Bianchi coming into the pits. And that's going to give Sato quite a bit of a lead now, as Heidfeld pushes quite hard and runs nearly off the track at the exit of 130R. cutting the curb quite a bit at the second apex of the chicane to try and straight line the car as much as possible as Heidfeld starts his 20th lap of the race. So we've actually seen quite a low number of retirements so far, and we are approaching half distance, about 6 and a bit laps away from half distance, but we've only seen Matthias Lauda retire, as well as one more, which was who was retired? Somebody else retired. It was a Toro Rosso of Daniel Ricciardo. Gilles Bianchi rejoined from his pit stop in 9th between Christian Albers and Lewis Hamilton. And Sergio Perez noticed that. I think he's up in 7th, so that was a good first stint from Sergio Perez. There he is, and he's ahead of the Force India of Christian Albers now. And there's Bianchi, and there's Hamilton in 10th. So who's pit stop sequence cost the most? Well, you probably would have to say Lewis Hamilton actually, because Bianchi's jumped him, as has Sergio Perez. But there's still at least one more pit stop to go for all these people, or maybe even 2 more stops depending on how much fuel they took on the first pit stop, but I suspect the field will be doing 2 stops. We switch to Timo Glock running in 20th, so we have had only the 2 retirements so far, Daniel Ricciardo and Matthias Lauda. Could see a few more by the end of the race, but Robin relatively well behaved, a lot more so compared to Adelaide, although the conditions probably didn't help matters. It was quite wet, very changeable in the early stages. Sato made no fewer than 6 pit stops. That was Kimi Raikkonen rejoining the circuit after what looked like a mistake at the S's. Now he had been closing into Mark Webber, into the gap between himself and 3rd place. It was 5.3 seconds, but it'll have gone up a bit now. 9.3, so he has lost exactly 4 seconds with what appeared to be a mistake. Nick Heidfeld's up in 5th place, so he's gained a lot from staying out quite long in his first stint, so it's been a very good race for the 2 Williamses. Now both running in the top 9 now, Heidfeld 5th, Bianchi 9th. But Takuma Sato, it's 3.2 seconds, the gap between himself and Jenson Button now, as the Japanese driver goes through the 130R. And Sato yet to win a race this season, as that's a battle for 8th between Bianchi and Albers into the spoon curve. They're side by side, but Albers will hold on to that one for now, but Gilles Bianchi is looking quite good. That's Adrian Suttle going through the 130R, and now braking hard for the Casio triangle. Right, left, cut the curb a bit, and now veer to the right as we go onto the start-finish straight to start another lap. This will be Suttle's 22nd lap, and Bianchi has taken Albers. That would have been going into the 130R. So Gilles Bianchi now moves up to 8th place, and that'll be some more useful points for Williams if it stays like this. There he is, and that visual shows that he has overtaken the Force India, although runs a bit wide at the second corner. And Albers now right up the gearbox once again, but it's single file through these S's. And I think they call this one here the anti-banked corner. And now the Dunlop curve, turning left. And when it opens out, you can go flat out through this bit in a car as good as this. Meanwhile, at the other side of the circuit, that is Jenson Button going through the spoon curve. And now into the back straight, crossing the grid hatchings for the western end of the circuit. And then he'll keep his foot as hard on the throttle as hard as he can for 130R, and then mash it for the brake pedal, left foot braking, and then starting another lap. And it's not a safe second for Jenson Button because Mark Webber is still quite close behind. And if Webber is indeed running a longer stint, then he'll be doing whatever he can to stay right behind his own teammate. Webber, remember, he should have won the Australian Grand Prix at Melbourne, but for Felipe Massa's puncture and petulant smash into the wall at the exit of turn 2, which detached his wheel, and then Webber collected it, necessitating an early second pit stop, and that was what helped Jenson Button win that race. And Jenson Button could have won the Oceanian Grand Prix, but went off in the fast 7 and 8 chicane sequence and crashed out before pretty much at Stag Bend actually. At that point the track was getting a bit drier, but Button on the intermediates pushing quite hard. Maybe the intermediates were overheating. But a few drivers did go off there. Christian Albers was one. He had actually switched onto slicks and after a reliability gremlin, and obviously that didn't work out because he crashed out on his outlap. Montoya getting it very wrong at turn 2, smashing it! Goodness me! Almost looked like a stuck throttle. But Montoya crashing out of the race quite heavily. So that was from 18th place, so his race wasn't going well anyway. He'd already made 2 pit stops, but that pretty much ends it completely for him. That'll move Timo Glock up to 19th place. Now as they crane away, Montoya is well out of the way of the circuit, so no other drivers should be in harm's way. But we're getting ready to crane at the Colombian. He's not had a happy time in his switched from McLaren to BMW Sauber. So hopefully for his sake it'll go a bit better. This is Montoya's former teammates we're looking at. Kimi Räikkönen still in that 4th place. Only 1.5 seconds ahead of Nick Heidfeld. So Kimi Räikkönen better step it up a little bit if he's going to stay in 4th place. And again, it just shows that the Williams is working very well in race trim, which off the track goes. That's a crash for Lewis Hamilton. That was from 10th place, and you quite clearly see front left gone. I think that was at the S's, it seemed like that. Oh, somebody's hit it! I think it was a Renault that had hit the errant wheel of Lewis Hamilton. Or rather, the wheel that had come off of Lewis Hamilton's car. Keep an eye out on who makes a pit stop at the end of this lap. I do think it was a Renault, and it might well have been Robert Kubica. So that's moved Kamui Kobayashi up into the points, up into 10th place. So we've now got both McLarens in the points. And that'll do their championship quite a bit of good. They've done okay so far. They currently sit 4th on 24 points, and that's courtesy of a pair of 4th places each for Räikkönen in Melbourne and 4th for Kobayashi at Adelaide. And once again, Räikkönen in 4th place, so McLaren's like the 4ths so far this season. But liking the lead at the moment is Takuma Sato. Gap is now 2.7 seconds, so compared to about 5 or so laps ago, the gap has gone down by half a second. So Jenson Button getting the hammer down a little bit, starting to catch up to Sato once again. And he's actually pulling away from Mark Webber as well. Gap between the two Toyotas, 1.5 seconds. In Kimi Räikkönen, some 9.8 seconds, not exactly closing in on Mark Webber. So it looks as if the top 3 are pretty much set as they are, unless something dramatic happens. The Renault that hits the errant wheel of Lewis Hamilton was Rubens Barrichello, because I just saw that he was into the pits for some repairs on his front end. Through the 130R goes Sato, and then braking for Casio. Curb on the right, curb on the left, nearly shortcutting that's how much curb they take. And we're pretty much now at half distance. This will be lap 26. And the gap still at 2.7 seconds between Sato and Button. So it looks as if we're going to be waiting until the pit stop sequence before we see some potential moves between the top 3. And Räikkönen's now gone more than 10 seconds behind Mark Webber. And Heidfeld still 1.5 seconds behind the McLaren, so looks as if they may still be battling for 4th, but it depends on when they'll pit. Heidfeld was actually the last of the 2 to pit, so if that repeats itself with the second round of pit stops, it's looking good for Heidfeld to take 4th. This is Sebastian Vettel. It was Sebastian Vettel that we were on board with. He's about half a lap behind the leaders, and is in 13th place. He's actually making a move on Hülkenberg, who gets it very wide, but just about hanging on there. But gaining a place at the expense of Hülkenberg is compatriot Sebastian Vettel, and behind the BMW Sauber is Fernando Alonso in the Super Aguri. They'll do well to score points in front of their home crowd with Super Aguri, but it'd be fun to see him try. I mean, Alonso's not a million miles away from the points, but 14th place is not where the Spaniard wants to be. Now, is Mark Webber closing in on Button? Well, still 1.5 seconds, so not exactly. I felt getting it dangerously wide at the exit of 130R as he brakes for the Casio. Gap going up a little bit between Raikkonen and Heidfeld, may go up a little bit more as they cross the line, so it was 1.8 seconds. It's actually gone down a bit, 1.7 seconds, so that's vindicative of Heidfeld pushing quite hard at this stage. As the Pirelli Shod Toyota goes through the Dunlop curve, that's Mark Webber, still in 3rd place, still 1.7 seconds behind, make that 1.6 as they crossed the first sector point. Used to be after the bridge, the first sector point, but then they moved it for the 2001 season. They did a bit of reprofiling that season, bringing the S's back a bit to increase the runoff zone, and it had the added effect of making the circuit a bit quicker because lap times went down a lot. And then in 2003 they modified the circuit further, possibly after the McNish accident. Here at the 130R used to be a sweeping corner, and then it became a bit of a double apexer. And they also moved the chicane back as well, making overtaking a little bit trickier there. This is Fernando Alonso we're looking at as he rounds, I think that's the hairpin curve, and then round the 300R, as he still tries to chase Nico Hülkenberg for 13th place. The number 11 on the front of the Super Aguri. That indicates that Super Aguri finished 6th in the championship. Last time off the track goes a Toyota, Mark Webber pushing hard to try and catch up to Jenson Button, overdoing it a little bit. As he now goes through the Dunlop, he'll have lost a bit of time. Keep an eye out on the gap. It was 1.7 seconds, but it'll have gone up quite a bit. About 1.5 seconds, 1.4 to be exact, as the gap is 3.1 seconds. Incidentally, that's the gap between Sato and Button as well, so the top 3 now separated by 6.2 seconds. And that little mistake from Webber will mean that Kimi Raikkonen will catch up to him a little bit, but not a lot. And probably not enough to try and challenge for a podium unless Webber makes an absolute clanger. This is Sato. Turn left, right there for the 130R. Jenson Button in 2nd, also turning left for the 130R. And then in the background, Webber will be doing the same thing, about 3 seconds later. And a small recap of the rest of the runners. Tistill's Adrian Suttle in 6th position. Both Force Indies in the top 10 because Albers is 9th as well. Suttle some 6.8 seconds behind Nick Heidfeld, so not exactly close. And Sergio Perez still doing well in 7th, 5.1 seconds behind the German in the Force India. Joe Bianchi in 8th, so both Williams in the top 8. So good races for Toyota and Williams and the Force India team. Let's have a look at Hülkenberg defending 13th place from Fernando Alonso through the 130R. Now choosing the middle, going into the Casio. And that is one of the Force Indians. Which corner is he going through? Is that the first couple of corners? I think so, because he's about to turn into the S's. But missing the apexes of both the first couple of corners. But pretty much safe there in 9th place. I say safe, he's only got 1 second between himself and 10th place Kobayashi. Kobayashi doing well in front of his home crowd. Where did he start on the grid? It wasn't that far up. Kobayashi was 18th on the grid, so that's been a decent drive from Kamui Kobayashi to get up into the points. trying to remember what tyres McLaren took for this race. They were definitely on softs for Adelaide. I think they may have gone mediums for this race. They possibly could have gone hards. I'm trying to work out if BMW Sauber did the same thing as well. I will double check that. So that was Mark Webber going through the first couple of corners. Now we switch to Felipe Massa in the other Super Aguri, going off at the first spoon curve, but luckily for him there is a big wodge of tarmac runoff, so he can easily recover that, although he has lost about a second to his own teammate Fernando Alonso. McLarens are actually running hards for this race, not the mediums. So Kimi Raikkonen's race pace probably should be... It's about right, actually, if that's compared to the Toyota. McLaren's probably not as good as the Toyota this season. Toyota do have a very strong car. BMW Sauber on the medium tyres. They did test aero for practice, as did McLaren. So 2 out of 3 BMW teams. That's that Kobayashi versus the Force India for 9th. That is the battle for 9th between Albers and Kobayashi, and Kobayashi looks the quicker driver at this stage. Makes me wonder if the Force India have gone softer on their tyre compound, because that does make sense if Kobayashi is quicker at this stage on the hard tyres than the 2 Force Indias. And whichever tyre compounds the team takes, that's for both drivers. That's not for one or the other. It's for both. So both Raikkonen and Kobayashi on the hards. And for Kobayashi at least it's working, because keep an eye out on the timing graphic at the bottom as we watch Jenson Button going through the S's. Did Kobayashi take Albers? I think he has done. Oh, he hasn't done. Has he done? Well, he's locked up quite hard into the Casio. He's done it. Kobayashi with a late out braking manoeuvre on the Albers, but got it a bit messy at the Casio, and that's going to give Albers an opportunity to retake 9th place off of the Japanese driver. The Japanese fans in the grandstands looking quite cautiously and nervously, because through the first couple of corners, Albers retakes that position off of Kobayashi. We are on lap 31 now, as we are on board with one of the drivers. Is that Takuma Sato we're on board with? I believe so, because there is the second sector point, and there behind is the Toyota. So this is that's the rearward shot of Sato, as into the Degner once again goes Kobayashi on Albers, but that is not going to work. Now he's lost a bit of time, but he can easily regain it. Kubica in 11th place. He could do something about the battling duo. Sergio Perez missing the first apex, a little bit of the spoon curve, but he's still up there in 7th place, doing well in the Ferrari. Behind him there is Jules Bianchi in 8th place, looking for more points, and wouldn't that be a deserved result? Where did he start on the grid? He wasn't that far up either. Bianchi, 17th, so yeah, that's a good drive from Jules Bianchi. That's Mark Webber we're looking at. In 3rd place, 3.2 seconds still behind Jenson Button, but Button is starting to close in on Takuma Sato once again. Gap is 2.8 seconds. And in fact, Button had lost a 10th in that first sector. Into the hairpin goes Mark Webber, but through the 300R goes Takuma Sato, and into the spoon curve goes Takuma Sato. Now if it stays like this, Sato would take the lead of the Drivers' Championship. So he sits on 23 points, and that consists of a 6th at Adelaide and a 3rd at Melbourne. And 25 points would certainly propel him ahead of the 2 championship leaders, Jenson Button and Adrian Sutil. I still find it amazing that Adrian Sutil's actually joint leading a championship, but that just shows you how much improved the Force India car is. That's Paul Di Resta we're looking at, who is probably a little bit sheepish after the incident that he had with Daniel Ricciardo early in the race, costing both Toro Rossos quite dearly. At the moment he sits in 16th place behind Felipe Massa, and he's some 17 seconds behind, so looks as if Paul di Resta's going to have a bit of a lonely drive down there. And I was just about to say on the timing graphic, Kobayashi versus Albers, and that's deja vu, because around the outside, brakes all locked up, goes to Kumasato, but now Albers is back in the slipstream once again. Kobayashi's going to have to try and defend this one with all his might, but Ferrari engine in the Force India working quite well, and looks as if Albers has retaken that position once again. He has. Nice little battle going on between those two. And it's certainly not over yet. What is the gap between Button and Webber? Because that looks a bit closer. Well, let's have a look at the gap which doesn't really exist between Albers and Kobayashi. Up the inside is a Degner, and nearly scaring Albers off. He actually ran a bit wide, but once again Albers hanging on, and now the Renault of Robert Kubica is coming into play because he's right behind the McLaren of Kobayashi, going into the hairpin. And through the hairpin goes Albers, Kobayashi and Kubica. Now then, across the line, the gap is 2.6 seconds between Takuma Sato and Jenson Button. And Webber is actually closing in a little bit on Jenson Button now, is less than 3 seconds. Heidfeld's into the pits from 5th place. So he's actually now pitted first out of the main lot, but which is a bit surprising. Now it was up the inside into the 130R of Kobayashi versus Albers. Are they side by side? Well, let's have a look at Rubens Barrichello, who's about to go a lap down. Sergio Perez is also making a pit stop, as is Kobayashi. So that's why Kobayashi was much quicker than Albers. It was because of a lighter fuel load, so that'll take some of the pressure off of Albers, and that will actually help Robert Kubica a bit, because, and Albers lost a position to Kubica. Interesting. So, I wonder if Kobayashi managed to do his brakes locked overtake round the outside of the Casio triangle, but then pitted immediately, delaying Albers in the process, and that has allowed Robert Kubica through. That's the hypothesis. And behind that's Vettel coming into play now, which is a bit surprising considering that he was nearly out of it after his incident with Lauda. He's out of the final corner. That's Rubens Barrichello, letting Takuma Sato, race leader, through to lap him. And that's good courteous driving from the Brazilian who hit that errant wheel of Lewis Hamilton in that unfortunate moment. More pit stops happening. Jenson Button is into the pits. And I think Kimi Raikkonen is as well. Yep, on the screen confirmation, Kimi Raikkonen into the pits. Briefly overtakes Jenson Button, but that's because the Toyota garage is first. Or probably second, actually. And the McLaren's a bit further down. Vettel having a look at Albers, who's not very quick at this stage of the race. As Heidfeld in 7th place. Now where's Kimi Raikkonen? Because those two were quite close together. There goes Kimi Raikkonen exiting the pits ahead of Heidfeld. So that's as you were before. But Raikkonen probably a little bit further ahead this time, due to the fact that he'd pitted a lap later than that driver there, Nick Heidfeld. Hulkenberg was also coming into the pits. But we have a look at Takuma Sato. And is this going into the 130R? I believe so. This is going to turn left for that very, very quick corner. Now, is he going to pit this lap, or is he going to go for another lap or two? Keep an eye on the timing screen as we look at Sebastian Vettel making another bit of contact into the first Degner, this time at the expense of Christian Albers. So Vettel's really getting his elbows out in this race. This time both drivers pretty much got away with it. And Sato was coming into the pits, so that will move Mark Webber into the lead briefly. But the Australian does have another pit stop to make. And somebody else, is it making a pit stop, or is that just Christian Albers dropping the position to Sebastian Vettel? Yeah, it must be. Who else is into the pits? Gilles Bianchi into the pits, temporarily winning in 5th place, but we'll drop down the order a little bit as we look at Nick Heidfeld in that 7th place, but he'll gain that position at the expense of Bianchi. And after that pit stop of Takuma Sato's, rejoins comfortably ahead of Jenson Button. And, well, Sutill's just overtaken Sato. In fact, something's happened to Sato. What's happened to Sato? He's dropped now behind Jenson Button. We need to see this. There he is! Sato's crashed it at the S's! So that is a golden opportunity to win the first race of the season. Gone. Well, pushing hard on the outlap. Or maybe it was a loose wheel, who knows, but it's come up as accident, so I suspect he has just... And there's another one off as well. It's Sebastian Vettel crashed out of the race as well. So, 2 crashes at the S's, pretty much on the same lap. Sato had his first, and he's done a number on that Red Bull, because you can see a wheel trundling its way onto the circuit. Better be careful that nobody hits it. And the front wing had gone as well. So Webber is now into the pits. Now, where can he rejoin in relation to Jenson Button? Because it does seem as if now it is between the 2 Toyotas for the race lead. But will it be Jenson Button, or will it be Mark Webber who wins the race? It should move Kimi Raikkonen up into 3rd place. Well, at the moment it will move Adrian Sutil into the race lead because he hasn't made his pit stop. That's Jenson Button behind. But where is Mark Webber? Showing his pit exit. We're kind of looking at the wrong driver, but Mark Webber may well have jumped Jenson Button once again. So deja vu at the second round of pit stops, because due to a good set of outlaps, Mark Webber has jumped Jenson Button again. This is Kubica versus Di Resta coming into the 130R. And they're chasing Kamui Kobayashi. But that was Di Resta taking the position off of Kubica. Maybe Di Resta has another pit stop to make, because that doesn't make too much sense. It would make more sense. And Jenson Button's just taken Mark Webber on the circuit somewhere, so although Webber did jump his teammate, Button's just taken it back off of him. Where has he done that? It'd be interesting to find out. So, effectively, Jenson Button takes the net lead of the race. But it'll only happen once that driver there, Adrian Sutil, makes his final pit stop. There's quite a few, and look at this, 2 Toyotas side by side at the 130R. This could be dangerous, but the moment it is Jenson Button has the upper hand, and closing the door a little bit on Mark Webber, who locks up quite a bit going into the Casio triangle, and getting a bit wide on the curb. And Sutil was going for another lap, but he was quite a bit quicker than Jenson Button and Mark Webber in that middle bit of the lap. Gap 3.3 seconds. But I think more crucially, the gap between Sutil and his nearest rival, or the rival that he's battling against in the pit stop sequence, which, looking at the timing screens, I think it's about Nick Heidfeld that he's aiming to get out in front of. If he stays out for another couple more laps, then that's doable. But maybe Sutil's heading for a 5th. With Alba's up in 6th. Is that Alba's? No, it's Alonso up in 6th, but probably has one more pit stop to make. Alba's in 7th at the moment. So that'd still be some useful points for the Force India team. It looks like Jenson Button's got a little bit of a gap over Mark Webber now. So once again, Jenson Button having a little bit of an upper hand at this part of the race, but who knows, Webber does have slightly fresher tyres compared to Button, and maybe he's just saving them for a harder attack. Sergio Perez getting dangerously wide at the first Degner, but hanging on to that one. He's in 10th place at the moment, but there's still a few needing to make their second pit stops. As he goes through the hairpin curve, that's sponsored by some cigarettes, and a phone supplier that's named after a fruit. Sutil gone through for another lap, so he still leads at the moment. Jenson Button in 2nd from the 3rd place Mark Webber. Now, of course, that will help Toyota's Constructors' bid to try and maintain their Constructors' Championship. A lot of good. But there's still a few laps to go, so let's not say anything just yet, as Fernando Alonso comes into the pits from what was 6th place, and Alba's into the pits as well. So that's actually going to move Jules Bianchi up into 6th place. And then up into 7th goes Felipe Massa, but probably temporarily. and then Sergio Perez up to 8th. But that should become 7th once Felipe Massa makes his final pit stop of the race. Now where's Kobayashi in relation to those two? Because Kobayashi's actually jumped both of them. So Kobayashi now up to 9th place at the expense of Alonso and Albers. Now that'll have been helped by Sebastian Vettel's crash and Takuma Sato's crash as well. In fact, Kobayashi might be on for another place once Massa makes his pit stop. So let's keep an eye out on that one as well. Good haul of points in McLaren if it stays like this. That's turning through the Casio triangle, the two Toyotas. And another lap for Suttle, so he's stretching it at this stage of the race. And I'm trying to remember when he first pitted because, well, obviously he took on a lot of fuel for the second stint. We're having a look at his teammate now, who sits in, I think it's 12th place he's in because Kubica's showing it as in 11th place. So Kubica's jumped the Force India. And not even slightly either, that was 3.2 seconds I saw there. There's still the two Toyotas quite close together, gap less than a second. This battle's probably going to go on right until the very last lap if Webber continues as he is on slightly younger tyres than his teammate. And Webber probably wants he really does want this race win. He did lose that win at Melbourne and then at Adelaide he was running in 3rd at the time ahead of Adrian Suttle before his gearbox packed in. Gap coming down a little bit between Suttle and Button. But going through the 130R goes the German, Adrian Suttle, running it quite nicely onto the outside curb. Now watch him how much curb he takes at the second apex. Almost pretty much at the white line. And another lap for Suttle. Interesting little strategy that he's running in the Force India. And it's lap 41 now, so there's 13 laps to go, including the one that they are on, as into the hairpin goes Suttle's teammate, Christian Albers. On the Bridgestone tyres, as you can just about see from the logo, it's not red, and it's not a thick logo either. No shade of blue on the sidewalls, so it must be Bridgestone's. And they have 4 tyre suppliers to choose from, Bridgestone, Michelin, Pirelli and Dunlop, but nobody seemed to want the Dunlop tyres. And only 2 teams wanted the Bridgestones actually. One of them was the Force India. And another team wanted Bridgestones, but I can't quite remember at this stage. Keep an eye out. Massa into the pits, so that moves Jules Bianchi up into 6th place, so now both Williams running 5th and 6th in this race. And who's taken 7th? Sergio Perez. Kobayashi now up into 8th place. Alonso 9th. Kubica up into the points. He's up to 10th place, and Alba's now 11th. Now 4th place Kimi Raikkonen looking quite lonely now in 4th. He sits 13 and a bit seconds behind Mark Webber in 3rd place. But he's over 4 seconds ahead of Nick Heidfeld as finally Adrian Suttle comes into the pits. So that's now moved both Toyotas back into the race lead. Or rather into the race lead because Takuma Sato had led the race for quite some time before crashing out at the S's on the outlap of his second pit stop. So 2 Toyotas now lead, Jenson Button from Mark Webber. Now keep an eye on where Adrian Suttle rejoins, because he's got a chance at jumping Nick Heidfeld if the Force India crew put in a very good pit stop. But Heidfeld has taken the position, so Suttle looks like he's rejoined in 5th place eventually. And there's your new 3rd place driver, Kimi Raikkonen, before we switch to Timo Glock. Here's a fair way down the order. And Alonso's just taken Kobayashi's for 8th place. So Fernando Alonso on the move at the expense of the second McLaren driver. Still running in 9th, but and in between Alonso and Kubica. There's Kobayashi's teammate, Kimi Raikkonen, rounding the hairpin curve. And as mentioned before, he's got quite a lonely drive at the moment. He has got Heidfeld about 4 seconds behind the McLaren. Kobayashi's just retaken Alonso for 8th, so there appears to be a nice little battle going on between those two. And with Perez a fair bit up the order, it looks as if that'll be okay. There's what we're looking at. That is Timo Glock going a lap down on the Toyota. There must be the race lead. Yep, the two ladies coming through. The Button and Webber possible scrap. And we are separated by just 0.6 of a second now, so Glock must have held up Jenson Button a little bit. Yeah, there is a raging battle going on between Alonso and Kobayashi. Now Alonso is back ahead of the Japanese driver. So, it'd be good to see those two for a little bit and see how they're getting along. And maybe Alonso with the slightly fresher tyres compared to Kamui Kobayashi probably will start to pull away a little bit now. He is a fair way behind Sergio Perez in 7th place. But pushing hard, because he's just locked up quite a lot, he's run wide onto the curb. Is that going to give Kobayashi the opportunity to retake Alonso? This is a good little scrap that we're seeing on the timing screen. Now we're seeing it on the pictures. Cosworth engine in the Super Guri versus the BMW in the McLaren. Side by side at the first corner, but the camera is not really paying attention. Alonso held on to that one in the end. So some good grunt in the back of the Cosworth. And that's helped it stay ahead of the BMW engined McLaren. And remember, BMW supplying a total of 3 teams, including their works counterpart, BMW Sauber, and the other 2 teams, McLaren and Williams. And for the 2 customer teams, it's going quite well, as we've got McLaren up there in 9th and 3rd, and Williams also up there in 4th and 6th. Yeah, that's been a good race for Jules Bianchi, up to 6th place now. Oh, who was that? Jenson Button off the track! Race leader Jenson Button having a spin at the S's, and that's handed Mark Webber the race lead. So, Jenson Button, was he pressured into a mistake? Probably, because Webber wasn't that far behind. So, that's given the Australian the initiative now, with just 10 or so laps to go. And he went off quite a way as well. More yellow flags and... Oh, Suttil! Adrian Suttil having an incident at the S's now. So, you wait all day for an instant, at 2 come up at once. That's put Bianchi up there into 5th place. And then did Suttil lose a part of his car? Looks as if he has. Front wing's gone. In fact, the entire front end is gone. So he's going to have to come into the pits for a bit of front end surgery. And that's going to put Sergio Perez up into 6th place, and that would be a very good result for Ferrari. There he goes, up into 6th. So, what will that do for the rest? Alonso will move up into 7th, and then Kobayashi up into 8th place. Now, will that move Christian Albers into the points? We'll keep an eye out on the timing graphic, and keep an eye on it to see Suttil's further descent down the order. But there is your new race leader, Mark Webber, taking advantage of that little mistake, well, big mistake for Jenson Button at the S's on the previous lap. And there's still your 3rd place driver, Kimi Raikkonen, and behind is Nick Heidfeld. And Heidfeld now 4.3 seconds behind the Flying Finn, as we switch to Barrichello being lapped by Mark Webber, going through the Dunlop, and then turning into the Degner. Pirelli tyres on the Renault, and Pirelli tyres also on the Toyota. Michelin tyres on the McLaren as Raikkonen goes through the Dunlop. So, Kimi Raikkonen 8.4 seconds behind Jenson Button as Suttil's made it into the pits for his new nose. And Alonso's taken that 7th, Kobayashi takes the 8th, Kubica. Well, Suttil plummeting down the order. It's not going to be any points for the joint championship leader. And it looks to be maximum points for Toyota, but there's still a few laps to go. And it could be Mark Webber taking his first win of the season. And will it be his first win since Fuji at the other Japanese circuits, interestingly enough. So Mark Webber obviously likes Japan. For a Japanese team, plenty of Toyota fans in the crowd, also plenty of Honda fans in the crowd, but they're a little bit subdued because both their drivers are out of the race. Takuma Sato crashing out at the S's, and then Matthias Lauda being shunted off by Sebastian Vettel at the first Degner. And it's a Honda circuit as well, so there's probably going to be a Japanese riot exiting the circuit. As for the other Japanese team, Super Aguri, Alonso's in there in 7th. And Felipe Massa's made his way up to 11th, so that's not a bad effort. So, what we've got side by side between Albers versus Massa for 10th place now. Keep an eye on that, the timing graphic. Massa might well have taken him round the outside under braking for the Casio triangle. Albers may get a run on him going down the main straight, but keep an eye as we have a look at Kimi Räikkönen. And it's 8/10 between Massa and Albers, so I think Massa's got that one covered. So both Super Aguris now into the points, 7th and 10th. So they've got a great car in the race, just didn't work out for them in terms of incidents. Massa obviously had that spin, and then Alonso, well, he had multiple mistakes, but he's kept it on the road in the end, and he's up to 7th. It's a good fight back for the Super Aguri team. As Nick Heidfeld, that's through the 130R, missing the apex by a bit. Hitting the apex is okay though for the Casio triangle, as he sits in 4th place. That'll be Williams' best result of the season. And with the Yankee up in 5th as well, that'd be a good birthday present for the team principal, Andy. We are in the closing stages now, and that's your 2nd place driver, Jenson Button, going through the Dunlop curve. And it looks as if he settled for 2nd. He's now more than 7 seconds behind teammate Mark Webber as Massa challenges Kubica going into the 130R. And that's the position gain, but Kubica having a look into the braking zone of the Casio. Keep an eye on the timing screen. And look at that kerfuffle, 3 wide almost, and contact between Massa and Kubica. And taking advantage of that is Christian Albers. Up into 9th goes the Force India. So they're scrappers. And look at this, up the inside into the first corner. Kubica just having a look, trying to distract Massa, going into what is actually called first corner. I like the literal interpretation that the Japanese do. And about to start lap 48. There'll be 6 laps to go. Mark Webber, race leader. And it'll be a good result for him because where does he sit in the championship? He sits... Where does he sit? He sits 4th in the championship on 18 points. That was courtesy of that 2nd place at Melbourne. I think he'd be tied actually with Jenson Button for the championship lead because Button sits in 2nd at the moment, and his other result was that win at Melbourne. So a couple of 1sts and 2nds for the 2 Toyota drivers means that they will be sharing the lead of the championship. I think Mark Webber will actually technically lead the championship because he's got a higher place when he retired at Adelaide compared to when Button retired at Adelaide. So it should be Mark Webber leading the championship by a very convoluted count back. Or we could go by qualifying results actually, in which case it'd be Jenson Button leading the championship because he started 2nd twice. Mark Webber started 2nd just the once. Nico Hülkenberg in 12th place now, so he sort of made his way up the order, but not quite in the points yet. That was a bit wide at the first couple of corners, and that's given Adrian Sutil, who's probably flying on his new set of tyres in the front wing. And Felipe Massa, I think, has made a mistake because he's only just ahead of these two now. And Sutil, is he going to have a look at Hülkenberg into the Degner? That is a good move. A very committed move, and Hülkenberg saw him coming, so that was a good awareness from the BMW Sauber driver. Now, Sutil's next target is Felipe Massa's 11th place. And Massa, how far back is he from 10th place Kubica? 3.6, so probably a minor mistake from Massa has dropped him a little bit behind Kubica. And now under threat from Adrian Sutil. Just through the 130R goes. Home hero to Kamui Kobayashi, but we switch to the Toyota of Martin Webber, about to enter the spoon curve for the 49th time. Now we switch to Felipe Massa. Big lockup we just about saw on his right front tyre, but still hitting the apexes no problem. But will be under pressure from Adrian Sutil. Gap between himself and Kubica, going up by half a second in that final sector, so that lockup not doing his tyres any good. His Pirelli tyres, as by the red sidewall. Yeah, he's struggling a little bit, is Felipe. So probably Sutil will take that position off of him at some point. As Jenson Button's about to put a lap on Timo Glock, who is probably around 15th place. Behind Rubens Barrichello, in fact. And crossing the line goes 3rd place Kimi Raikkonen. That'll be, if he stays where he is, that'll be McLaren's first podium of the season. And we've had 2 Toyotas take a podium, and then 3rd in that first race was a Honda. And then a Force India, and then a Super Gary and a Renault. So McLaren will become the 6th team to take a podium finish if it stays like this. And who knows, if something happens to the 2 Toyotas, we could see a Williams on the podium, and that would make it 7. Round the 130 out. That is the battle now for 11th between Massa and Sutil, but now we switch back to race leader Mark Webber. And that's a masterclass of how to do the spoon curve. And is this going to be a masterclass on how to lap a driver? Oh, he spun it! Jenson Button spun it, trying to lap that Ferrari. Now then, is he going to rejoin? He's rejoined just ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. So very scrappy driving from Jenson Button, it seems, in this final stint. And he lost quite a lot of time to Mark Webber. And now Kimi Raikkonen is just 2.8 seconds behind him. So keep it together, Jenson. Because there is 3rd place Kimi Raikkonen. And he can try and just about see the Toyota. He probably will be able to see him. As he goes to the start-finish straight, as into the Degner, that was Massa, looked like he was under pressure from Sutil. Making sure just to give him space. But that's Nico Hülkenberg. Well, he can see the 2 in front of him, so if he plays his cards right, he could take advantage of the battling duo. And who knows, maybe if one of the top 10 has an issue, then Hülkenberg could get a point, but I'd say that's unlikely at this stage. Through the hairpin goes Mark Webber, and he'll only have to do that another 2 times. Now, Adrian Sutil 12th. Having a look at Felipe Massa going into the 130R. How submissive is Massa going to be? Fairly submissive looking at that, and he ran quite wide onto the curb and a little bit more. So Sutil takes 11th place. And there's some yellows out now. Who has had an incident somewhere? Let's keep an eye out on the timing screen at the bottom. Doesn't look as if it's anyone from the top 11. So we'll have to wait and see what comes up on the timing graphic. It's still out. And it's Webber! Mark Webber's stopped! What's happened there? Well, goodness me. What? Well, I'm at a loss to explain that one. So where is that? That is at the spoon curve, isn't it? And he's making a right hash of rejoining. Well, he's down to 4th, so we are going to see a Williams on the podium, it seems. So, well, Webber's just thrown that away completely, it seems. And that has put Jenson Button back into the lead of the race. Kimi Raikkonen now up into 2nd, and there's your new 3rd place driver, Nick Heidfeld. Well, it is the team principal's birthday. That will be a tremendous present for him. Well, I'm speechless. I'm speechless at that one. So now there's 2 laps to go. Jenson Button looking set for his 2nd win of the season now, it seems. And Webber into the pits. So I think Webber has had a spin somewhere and he's made it as far as the barriers. Because now he's had to make it into the pits. And it's going to drop him down, way down the order. That is a disaster for Webber. what could have been his first win of the season, he's just thrown it away, it seems. So, Bianchi's now up to 4th, Perez is now up to 5th, and Alonso's going to move up into 6th place as well. And is Webber going to rejoin ahead of Kobayashi? I think he might well have done. So Webber, having led the race and looking certain for the victory, has dropped it down to 7th. New fastest lap for Adrian Sutil, who is in that 11th place. How far is he behind 10th place Kubica? Just 1.6 seconds. Sutil's got a chance at a point here if he really pushes hard on the final lap. He is on the penultimate lap now, so he can still do it. Sutil can still get a point. As exiting the final corner goes Kimi Räikkönen. He's really not that far behind Button. He's just over 3 seconds. It's 4.1 actually. Lost a 2/10 of a second behind Jenson Button. So Webber's off again at the spoon curve again. What are you doing, Mark? Just keep it together and you'll still get some decent points. And Albers has just taken Kamui Kobayashi for 8th place. It's all kicking off in these closing stages of the race. In fact, look at them in the background. That is Albers versus Kobayashi down the back straight. Keep an eye out on the 130. I think Kobayashi had just about taken that. Trying to frighten Albers out of space. And that battle's going to rage on for the final lap. So there's a few battles yet to be decided. Battle for 8th, battle for 10th. That might be about it actually, as another new fastest lap for Sutil. A 1:30.0. Now, can he do something about 10th place Kubica? It could be another point for Renault. That would make points in every race, but in any case, that's your 2nd place driver Kimi Räikkönen about to enter the 130R. But we should be looking at the race leader. We're looking at Paul Di Resta going through the first couple of corners because it is the final lap and he's about to cross the start-finish line and to take his 2nd win of the season. Wait for it. Jenson Button takes the win. So Jenson Button, win number 2 of the season. That will maintain his championship lead. And Kimi Räikkönen should come home in 2nd position. There is your winner, Jenson Button. And 3rd, and it'll be a great result for Williams, Nick Heidfeld. As into the spoon curve goes Adrian Sutil versus Robert Kubica. And slowing down, that's Massa slowing down. So that's a mechanical issue for the Brazilian. We'll keep an eye out on Sutil versus and Albers versus Kobayashi still going on for 8th place. But we're looking at Felipe Massa. And off the track goes Fernando Alonso at the final corner. What's he done? What's Fernando Alonso done? Is that a mechanical gremlin that's put Mark Webber up into 6th place? Albers is going to finish 7th. A fastest lap for Mark Webber on that last lap, so he's pinched that off of Sutil. And Massa with a suspension failure. What's happened to Alonso? And that's a wheel off. Well, if Alonso's just gone and crashed that, which he hasn't done, it's a gearbox failure right at the final corner. And rather than freewheeling it, he's decided to just shunt it into the barriers. So, chaotic ends to the Japanese Grand Prix, and I must review the results. In which case, Jenson Button takes the 2nd win of the season. Kimi Räikkönen takes his 1st podium of the season, McLaren's 1st that is, and Williams take the 1st podium of the season in the form of Nick Heidfeld, and with Gilles Bianchi in 4th place. Brilliant result for the Williams team. I think Andy will be happy with that. And Sergio Perez gets points for Ferrari in 5th. Webber 6th, despite nearly winning it and binning it pretty much. In 6th place. 7th. Who on earth was 7th? It was Christian Albers. Took that off Kobayashi at the end. Adrian Sutil 9th, and completing the points, Robert Kubica. So that marks the end of round 3. And teams can now use some of their 100 free tokens to upgrade their cars or maybe their drivers before the next race, the Malaysian